Welcome to Commander Pop Culture, a place to gather magical information with some laughs, might I add. Hello everyone, welcome. It's that time again. It's spoiler season. Modern Horizons 3 comes out June 14th, and today is the official first day. I don't cover leaks because I don't know if they're real. You're all here to hear about my takes on applications of the new cards and my takes on the new arts.
It has begun!
First off, we have Ruby Medallion. These just got reprinted in Commander Masters, so be driving the price down even further. Last time I checked, they were in like the $10 range. It might even go even below that. I don't know if they'll become cheap enough for me to feature on the channel for my budget leagues and my budget decks, but these look fantastic. I do buy the fancy versions for my personal collection in paper. It's like a auto must-have in your collection. Pearl Medallion. This one's for white. Also looks fantastic. Something I found a little weird is her lower lip appears to be bedazzled in pearls. I wonder who decided to do that. Maybe her upper lip is too. Like if you look at the corners of her upper lip, you can see the bottom parts of pearls too. Be very interesting to I don't know, open and close your mouth. I don't know if anyone's ever like worn pearls before. They can get kind of pinchy if you have them around a sensitive area or like your lips. I do not recommend. Jet Medallion, nice. Just snatching out your own bleeding black eyeball, I guess.
You eyeball me again, I'll snatch it out and put it in East Coast cookie bag.
Emerald Medallion. Out of all the ones we've seen so far, this one looks the most traditional. The first couple had very unique takes. This doesn't look too far off from the original, but still cool. I like that they're taking liberties and letting things drip over the text box. You could still read it just fine, which I think has been an issue in the past. Like, they layered it so the image itself comes over the text box, but not over the text. Like if you read the title up here, I think that will satisfy some people, because I remember some full arts in the past where they did that. And I think it was a version of Smothering Tithe where the art spilled over the text box and people couldn't read it. But I think people will be satisfied with this. Ulamog the Defiler. This is a new version. On cast, you exile half of someone's library, rounded up. Has ward, forces someone to sack 2 permanents. That's pretty brutal. ETBs with +1/+1 counters equal to the greatest mana among value from the pile of cards that are exiled. It also doesn't care how cards are exiled, so this could see things that like were already exiled, like O-Ring, or like say you exiled stuff with a Relic of Progenitus. It just looks for the highest CMC that was exiled and enters with those counters. And then it gets Annihilator X, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters. Again, the ability is disjointed, so you could actually pump this up by other means with +1/+1 counters and make it even bigger post that ETB trigger. Sounds pretty sweet. It has a cast trigger, it has ward as a triggered ability, it also has a combat ability, and it has an ETB trigger. So I don't know, take your pick on what decks you want to play, because there's so many different things out there that double triggers of different kinds that I could see this fitting in multiple different decks because of that. Colors like the Broken Reality. Up to 2 target players each manifest cards from your hand, and then you draw for each card manifested that way, meaning you'll draw 4 off of this. It's fitting because the original Kozilek drew 4 cards as well. The static ability of +3/+2, that's harkens back to the Eldrazi Scions from, I think it was Oath of Gatewatch. They were 3/2s, or their stats were staggered like that purposely. It does seem like a bit of an overkill kind of a piece, because like if you're playing big dumb Eldrazi's, what do you need a stat increase for? But if you wanted to play this and maybe as your commander, you could run like a colorless token theme deck, and then you can make them all into lethal attackers. Kalia the Vast getting a full art treatment, that's pretty sick. We've already got one in the past. Take your pick of which one you like more. This is the Double Masters one, which I own. I can appreciate this one a little bit more because the profile, it's much more zoomed in, and there's much more detail, like in her armor, her weapons, the tattoos, the wings look nicer. This kind of looks like a little bit of a Mod Podge. The Double Masters one, currently going for $76. Holy cow. Well, I might just sell mine and pick up this version. I imagine it'll be cheaper. Genku Future Shaper. Whenever a non-token permanent you control leaves the battlefield, you choose one that has been chosen this turn. Each of them give you a different kind of creature token. And then for 5 mana, you could put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. You can max make 3 tokens per turn. And if you're able to flicker things during other people's turns, like if you have flash and you can bounce white main lion back to your hand multiple times in a revolution of the table, you can make a ton of tokens. Breya Ethereum Shaper. This is a reprint. I am not a big fan of these portraits with the pastel backgrounds. I have the fancy Breya with the gold filigree. This one has a little bit more style to it, I guess you could say. Depends on how cheap this is. Like, I don't mind it so much. I just wish they did more with the background. And what's weird is I think this set is far enough apart from Commander Masters where I think Wizards might get the memo that a lot of people didn't like it. There's always someone out there that does appreciate it. I just don't know if it's for me personally. I wonder if they blew up the image larger because the arm looks a little unproportionate. Like, I could make it out based through the text box and on the edges. It looks a little funky, and then they probably hid it in the text box on purpose.
Clever girl.
6. Whenever it attacks, mill 3 cards, and you put a land from among them into your hand. As long as it's your turn, non-land permanent cards in your graveyard have retrace. Oh, it combos into itself. So you mill a bunch of non-land permanents, you put a land in your hand, and then you can swap out the land with something that's in your graveyard. That seems pretty nice, and it doesn't care about the cards that were specifically milled. They could be stuff that's been in your graveyard for a while. Grist the Voracious Larva. They're bringing back the tiny versions of Planeswalkers. It's like, it tells a little bit of a story. It tells how they got their spark, and then the back half is them as a Planeswalker. It's like an origin story on a card. It has Death Touch. Whenever it or another creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it enters from your graveyard or you cast it from your graveyard, you may pay it 1 additional green. If you do, you get to flip him. Let you appreciate the art for a little bit here. It looks pretty dope though. +1, you make a insect. Mill 2 cards, put a Death Touch counter on it if a black card is milled. -2, you get to destroy an artifact or enchantment, so a naturalize. And then -6, for each creature card in your graveyard, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's at 1/1 insect. That would be pretty broken depending on how loaded your graveyard is. You're in the right colors of Golgari. Since it has this little half circle here, where it's black and green, if you were to play this as your commander, you are a black-green deck. I think you care more about the ETB triggers. Just load up your graveyard with as much as you can. Hopefully you find some scary triggers in your graveyard to take advantage of, and you have a pretty solid win condition on the back half of this card. Eldamri the Correctol. I think I pronounced that right. Look at the top of your library anytime. You can cast creature spells from the top of your library. If you're a green and tapping 2 untapped creature control, you can reveal a card from your hand or the top of your library. If you reveal a creature, you get to put it in the battlefield. It's a really cool value creature, and it has a lot of sweet card advantage. But based on the bottom ability, you kind of want to be playing big dumb creatures so you could cheat them into play. Wheel of Potential. You get 3 energy, you may pay X energy. Each player may exile their hand and draw X cards. If X is 7 or more, you may play cards you own exiled this way. And oh, it says until the end of your next turn. So if you meet the 7 claws of energy, you impulse your hand away, and it's like Reckless Impulse or Ren's Resolve, where you are afforded 2 turns to play those cards. It gives you a lot of opportunity not to let things go to waste. I think this has a niche place because it cares about energy, but it's really powerful. Ral the Monsoon Mage. It's a coupon for instants and sorceries. Whenever you cast one during your turn, you flip a coin. If you lose the flip, it deals 1 damage to you. If you win, you may exile it and flip them over. ETBs with the extra loyalty counter for each instant and sorcery you've cast that turn as free sweep. It has a +1 to give its basically front side the same ability till your next turn. Ooh, this ability will be active through your opponent's turns. That's really nice. -2, it deals 2 damage among any number of 2 targets. Draw a card if you control a blue permanent other than Ral. So if you needed more indication to determine color identity, this says it directly in its activated ability. So just so if anyone questioned the identity of the backside of the card, this is just proof in the pudding, because it itself acknowledges that it's blue. -8, exile the top 8 cards of your library. You may cast instant and sorcery spells from among them. this turn without paying their costs. That's pretty nice. It's like, is it Epic Experiment? I don't remember what it's called, but it's a blue-red spell with X in its CMC, and it lets you do the same thing. Power Balance. This is the red version of Counterbalance. It's very fitting. It looks very similar to the Counterbalance R2. It's just the inverse side. OG Counterbalance, it's blue shooting upwards, and you from the perspective of blue side. It's referring to card. So once a card is on the stack, it's a spell actually. So this doesn't operate at all like Counterbalance. You clash with the spell, you reveal the card from the top of your library. That card from your library is what you could cast for free. Flare of Duplication lets you sack a non-token red creature to forego its converted mana cost. You get to copy an instant or sorcery spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. Fitting for red. These free spells, I like that they're making the condition slightly more challenging, where you actually have to give something up for it to happen. In the past, Wizards have printed free spells, and they were just too good. Like, there's no drawback to them, and these do, which I appreciate. Sorin House of Markov. Lifing and Extort. It's a 1/4. He's got a big butt. Must be. He's got to be sitting down for it.
I like big butts and I cannot lie.
At the beginning of your post-combat main phase, if you gain 3 more life this turn, exile them and return to the battlefield transformed. Since it has Extort, I feel like that's pretty easy, and it has Lifelink himself, so you could probably safely attack someone, get your 1 life that way, and then cast 2 spells to gain the remaining 2 that you need to make the condition. Sorin Ravenous Neonate. He looks like the edgelord from Castlevania series.
Please.
Also has Extort as a passive. +2, make a food token. -1. Deal damage equal amount of life you gain this turn to any target. That's pretty dope. That could be a win condition if you gain enough life in a turn. It's an expensive -6. What's weird is I think the best ability on this thing is actually its -1 ability. It kind of combos with the +2. You make food token, sack the food token, you could shoot something for 3. Krix, Sunny Yawgmoth. This looks dope. I like the color pairings here. Obsidian with yellow. If you don't know what Kirk does, it's just a black storm deck. Your goal is to net more life than you lose, and you just get such a tremendous lead that there's nothing for your opponents to do. He's one of those like kill on sight types of commanders. Flare of Malice. This one you can cast for free. Each opponent sacks a creature or planeswalker with the greatest mana value. It's also an instant. A popular spell that did the same thing. It costs 3 mana. I don't remember what set it was, where it does the same thing, and that's a pretty popular card. Tamiyo, Inquisitive Student. 0/3 flying for 1 mana. She attacks, you investigate. When you draw your 3rd card a turn, exile Tamiyo and return flip. I like it. I think I'd play this in a Super Friends shell because of this top ability. Makes it so your stuff's much harder to deal with. And when you're playing Super Friends, you're running a lot of board wipes, i.e. instants and sorceries that keep your board safe again. So its -3 is actually quite useful. And the -7 is pretty darn scary. It's like the full package that I want to see in a Planeswalker for Super Friends decks. When I pick and choose Planeswalkers, I want everything to be useful. And I especially want the last ability to be a game-breaking effect. So it should be worth pursuing. White Orchid Phantom. Hey, it's done by my favorite artist, Richard Kane Ferguson.
Oh, Richard, I'm so happy.
He's very known for this style of artwork. People call him the pressure washer of Magic's artist community. But I love it. It reminds me of Heavy Metal, if you've ever seen that movie. But on ETB, you get to destroy 1 target non-basic land. Its controller searches for a basic, puts it on the battlefield. Pretty much the inverse of White of the Night Orchid. Pearl Ear Imperial Advisor.
Try saying that 5 times faster.
3/4 with lifelink for 3 mana. Enchantments have affinity for auras. Whenever you cast an aura that targets a modified permanent control, you get to draw a card. It's a very self-fed card. You get a cantrip for targeting something that's already enchanted, and then the cost gets reduced for every aura that's already in play. It does have a little bit of a double-edged sword, because if the creature that has a bunch of enchantments on it dies, you lose a lot of your affinity. I kind of like the design on this. It's high risk, high reward. Flare of Fortitude. This is the white free spell. Until end of turn, your life total can't be changed. Permanents control gain hexproof and indestructible. It's a get out of jail free card. It's not as good as Teferi's Protection, but I like that your life total can't change, so it's strictly better than Flawless Maneuver. It also gives hexproof, which can be relevant. Ooh, Esper Sentinel's getting a reprint. This is a $20 white card. Very overdue. It's also getting the sweet border treatment like in the past. Sapphire by Dalian, also a more traditional take. Looks pretty sick. Putting your mono blue decks. Ragavan's getting a reprint. This is pretty expensive. 40 bucks. Definitely needs one for all those folks in Modern that want to compete and don't have a lot of money to do so. I appreciate these kinds of things because I think 60 card formats really want them. Expressive Iterations getting another full art treatment. Yeah, it was a Secret Lair showdown, so like you got it showing up at a store. Take your pick. You like this one or you like that one. I collect full arts and I don't see the point in owning multiple, but whatever tells the better story is what I end up going with. This one has not a sharp image. I think I like this one slightly more. Dismember is a staple in black. One of the best removal spells in the game. Most people never pay the 2 Phyrexian symbols, so it's just basically a 1 mana, deal 4 damage yourself to give something -5/-5, and it's at instant speed. Prismatic Ending looks pretty sick. It's another full art treatment. Thought-Knot Seers getting another full art treatment. I have the 2 Secret Lair ones, the one that's sketched and the other one that's not. There's this version and then there's this version. They look pretty similar. They're just slightly different shades, different camera angle. I don't know if this image does the card justice, but like I can make out a ton of more detail with this one and I probably won't give it up. But if you don't want to spend 12 bucks for this one, I imagine this will be a lot cheaper. Oh, they're bringing back the Incarnations and giving them full art treatments as well. Like the previous Endurance does not look as good as this one. I think I remember why I don't like this one as much is like the text box in the title box is less opaque. You could see through it and you get more image. Versus this, it kind of blots out the card. You can get this version that I have for 30 bucks. I'm considering selling them and just getting these because they just look a lot better. Yeah, I might just replace them all. The image just looks cooler. Realistic, if that makes sense. I mean, it's a fantasy world and there's fantasy creatures on them. But like something about this looks way sharper than this. This looks like a painting. This looks like a photo.
Old and busted, new hotness.
Persist is getting a full art treatment. I play this in all my budget decks. I think this goes for like $1.50, $2. Happy to replace my regular version with a full art one. Damn, this looks terrifying. Bunch of hands ripping up someone's chest, and there's like multiple layers. So they're like, there's a set of hands grabbing the rib cage and a set of hands grabbing the tissue outside of it. Pretty dark art in my opinion, but I love it. Fury also looks pretty sick. I thought Fury was banned. Yeah, it's banned in Modern, which is kind of funny. This Modern Horizons is particularly meant for Modern, and to be printing banned cards in the set just feels kind of awkward. They're dirt cheap. They're like $5. Pick them up if you don't got them because they're great in Commander. Flusterstorm. This is a solid reprint. Mostly played in CDH. You want as many cheap counter spells as you can in those decks. This just effectively counters pretty much anything that you needed to counter due to the Storm Clause. If someone has cast a bunch of spells in their turn, normally that's what happens when people are trying to combo off and win. You just shut them out of the game. Or if you're trying to combo off and win, your spell count gets tremendously large as well. Orm's Chant, hell yeah. Another CDH card getting a full art treatment. It locks people out of your turn. You cast it during when you're trying to win. It has more flexibility because you can play it at other people's turn and deny them the ability to win the game. Pretty sweet addition. This is like a $20 card. Good to see it. And I'll replace my copy with this. This feels a little bit like a joke. He looks very regal, but I guess regally bad. I don't really like the art that much on this. I kind of want to see the regular version of this card.
It's hideous.
I don't know how to break it down any nicer. Just like for the memes, you play this. I think this fits in the bin of the MS Paint of Faithless Looting. Let's see. King Among Bears. Other creatures with base power 2/2 are bears in addition to its other types. Well, if you compare him to Queen of Bears, Ayula, I would say Ayula wears the pants because she just blows this effect out of the water. Hargas, Erupting Hellkite. It looks pretty sweet. I can respect this portrait. Has a merge of 8. You cast a spell, exile your hand. If you do, draw 3. Each creature spell you cast has emerged. Ooh. The emerge cost is equal to its mana cost. So what that means is you will be transcribing the cost from those creatures and putting it in the text box with it. So let's give an example. Say Solemn Simulacrum has 4 colorless. You can sack a creature and reduce the cost of Solemn. So if you sack a 4 CMC creature, you pay for its costs. You could overpay too. Like if you sack this dragon, it'd be a waste, but you could. It would be a free spell. I don't know why you would do that, because this gives all your creature spells emerge. Something that would be kind of cool is playing a bunch of creatures that cantrip off themselves. So you could literally make the parties keep going, and you just fill it with one-off effects like ETB and death triggers. I imagine you could go pretty deep in a deck with something like that. I'd be very interested to see the lists that come around this. You could also play it very Tim-like. You could play an Eldrazi deck and then make it so all your OG Eldrazi have emerged as well and reduce their incredibly expensive costs to cheat them into play. And that's a good thing, because all the Eldrazi spells have cast triggers, and emerge counts as casting a creature, so you're not missing out on those cast triggers. That might be one of the better ways to play them, but I like the idea of making every creature cantrip off themselves in some way. Belia, the Exuberant Shepherd. We have a Corgi in the universe now. Has flash. Its attack trigger is kind of unique. You exile a non-land permanent and it comes back on end step. If it entered under your control, you get a +1/+1 counter. So what's unique about this is you could target anything. It doesn't have to be something that you control. So if someone steals one of your permanents, you could get it back. You could broker a deal with someone and be like, hey, if I flicker this, will you kill someone else's creature? This also lets you flicker your own things to get them back. So like if you want to steal, say, Gilded Drake, you'll get it back and steal something again, and then keep that fun going. The fair part about this card is it doesn't have evasion. So you can catch people with their pants down by, casting this for flash. The other powerful effect about this card is for this trigger to flicker something, it usually costs 4 mana. So for its cheapness, it's quite a significant card. A lot of unique stuff around this that I thought of. I think for a rare, you should be able to get it for a decent price. But because of all those factors I mentioned, it might have some kind of value to it. Because it's a rare, I don't see it being more than $10, but you never know in Magic. The demand is normally really high in pre-season sales. It's also pretty high during the first month. Just wait for the prices to fall. I usually buy cards from sets a month after they release, and you pretty much get it either at its lowest or when it's near its lowest that it'll see before it climbs up in value. Ugin's Labyrinth. On ETB, it imprints something if it's 7 or greater. Tap to add a colorless. If it's got a card exiled with it, it taps for 2. That's pretty sick. And then tapping it, you can return the exiled card to its owner's hand. There's like no downside to pitching a card to this, because like if you're stuck with expensive cards in your hand, you're not going to be casting them for a while anyways.
Save that guy for later.
And then when you're good and ready, just get the card back. You're not losing any value. Chthonian Nightmare. ETB, you get 3 energy, pay X energy, sack a creature, return Chthonian Nightmare to its owner's hand, and then you return a creature with mana value X from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcerer. So it's like Reoccurring Nightmare, but has the claws of energy. If you don't know what Reoccurring Nightmare is, it's a banned card in EDH because of how powerful it is. Even in modern standards, this is pretty powerful. Most curves are really dirt cheap, especially in aggro decks. And this is also dirt cheap to pay for only 2 mana. This card's pretty busted. I'd play this in almost all my black decks because I build a lot of decks on my channel and my curve is traditionally extremely low. I'm usually below 2 CMC average in every single deck. This could probably hit a lot of good things. The broken part about it is that you could do it over and over again. You could even loop the creature you sacrifice to this if it has a significant trigger on it and you got nothing else better to reanimate. That's a pretty sick deal. And the fact that you just do this over and over again in your turn. If you have any creature that drains people, like Geralt's Messenger, it's a 3-drop that drains people for 2. If you're in the late game and you have nothing else better to spend your black mana on, just loop your Geralt's Messenger over and over again. It's the free counter spell. This looks like the strongest one by far. Just interaction. The black one's good too, but since this interacts on the stack, it's just strictly the best. And it looks pretty dope. I imagine this will be incredibly expensive. Oh, we're getting full art fetch lands. That is spectacular. I have sets of these. These will be a pretty penny. I bet there's already like insane pre-order prices for these. Everybody wants fetch lands, and now you give them borderless. Everyone wants a borderless fetch land. Okay, $24. So this is basically like the traditional price that they were going at. If you already had intentions of buying them, why you wouldn't just spend like the few bucks extra and get the more pretty version?
Shut up and take my money!
Yeah, that looks sick. I'll definitely be picking up copies for myself. And depending on their colors, they're usually more expensive. Green white is one of the cheaper ones. Traditionally, it's anything with blue or black is way more expensive. Got wooded foothills, that gets the mountain and forest. Polluted delta. All right. Traditionally, because you're taking the two most popular colors and putting them on the one, this has always been the most expensive. These haven't been printed since, I think, the Tarkir block. Yeah, 40 bucks. Damn, but I want them. I think everybody wants them. Flood Strand literally looks like Pride Rock. With, I guess, water going into some kind of funnel in the distance. Pretty sick. Bloodstained mire. Nice. It does look like a mire, and like these weird, I don't know, War of the Worlds factories are literally dripping blood into the mire. I like it a lot. Gets a mountain and swamp. The reason why, if you're a new player, I'll break down into why these lands are so expensive, is they can tutor for a swamp or mountain. It doesn't specify that it has to be a basic, so you can tutor your shock lands and your duels with this. And there's a couple of other lands out there that have dual typings on them, like tapped ones that came in Kaldheim. There are tapped ones that came out recently in Mergers of Karlov Manor. Those are the ones that surveil, but you could tutor those with these. And what's also unique about these is you could get off-colored versions. So like you could tutor for a mountain, but that mountain can be a mountain forest or a mountain island. Fetch lands are the ultimate ways of fixing your mana when you're in a pinch. And that's why they're so popular and so expensive. For every format that fetch lands are legal, people play them. So Modern, Legacy, Vintage, Commander, the demand is just tremendously high. New Emrakul. When you cast a spell, gain control of all creatures target player controls, has flying, protection from spells and from permanents that are cast this turn. Every iteration of Emrakul, they have a very unique way of making it so it's incredibly hard to get rid of. I like the direction they took with this. You could flicker permanents and get the job done and maybe remove this. And there are some stuff out there that just sits in play that you can use to kill stuff with. Like a classic thing I play on a budget is Transmogrifying Wand. That would be something you could use to kill this as an example. When it leaves the battlefield, sack all creatures control. Ooh, you could do some dirty stuff with this. You could steal target player's stuff, go to combat, deal a bunch of damage, and then if you have a sack outlet, sack out Emrakul, and then all their stuff goes with it. I like it a lot. It has a way to circumvent its costs. You could pay 6 waste mana by discarding it and paying its mana madness cost. That seems like a tall order. Not just any deck can do that. I think you'd have to be exclusively be playing a colorless deck. There's not a lot of cards out there in colorless that force you to discard. If you also want to take advantage of this, you have to draw it traditionally. It's not something you could have in your command zone and get the madness trigger off. It's a little clunky. I think it's very powerful for what it does, and it's worthy of a 99 slot spot, but I think it'll be really hard to pull off the madness. And if you get it, you earn it, kind of a thing. Psychic Frog. Deals damage to a player or planeswalker, you get to draw. Discard to put a counter on it, and then has an active ability to exile 3 cards from your graveyard against flying till end of turn. It's like a unique version of Infiltrator. Has a bunch of activated abilities. I like that it sizes up. I probably will put this in my cube in the near future. If you don't know, I have a 2-headed giant commander cube. You could also play it solo. You don't have to play it in teams. I like this a lot for that it's a small creature that sizes up. It makes her really fun, mid-rangey gameplay. And I made a video about my cube very recently, so if you want to check that out, I suggest you go take a look. It's pretty sweet. Flare of Cultivation. Oh, it's a free Cultivator Kodama's Reach. Pretty dope. Welcome to the ramp community. Layla the Blade Reforged. Something that's cool if you don't know on Magic the Gathering Online or Moto, this is a gift card. You can only get it in chess and it has a lot of monetary value. It's $20. Since it's getting printed in a set that's getting released on Moto, this should decrease in value significantly, which I think a lot of people will be happy for. And it looks cool. Can't wait to replace my version in my personal collection. A Johnny Nicatl the Pariah. I don't know about you guys, but they made a Johnny super sexy. I imagine if you're a furry, you can appreciate this or appreciates the male figure. I wonder why they had to make him so buff, or is he always that buff? ETB, you make a cat token, and then whenever one or more cats you control die, you get to flip him. It has to be another cat, can't be a Johnny himself. Becomes a much more angry version.
Fucking one mean pussy.
And for +2, put a counter in each cat you control. That's pretty scary. And then for 0, you get to make a cat warrior. If you control a red permanent, you deal a bunch of damage to any target equal to the number of creatures you control. That seems busted too. -4. For each opponent, choose an artifact, creature, and equipment planeswalker. It's like a balance effect. And you, from among those permanents they control, they sacrifice the rest. Awesome. It's a one-sided board wipe. It doesn't affect you. Have a pretty wide board. All the blockers go away. You could probably swing out and kill people after you activate this main phase 1. And getting to this ability is really fast. You plus once, following turn, you can kill everybody. Definitely the best little planeswalker we've seen so far. Very fitting for the story. I imagine this in the background is Johnny's brother. This actually, lore-wise, is a character I'm very familiar with because he's one of my favorites. In the Pride, his brother was the chief, and he was a bit of an outcast of his albino fur, and he also had unique properties because he was a cleric. Not many cattles had healing magic. He gets a spark when his brother dies, and he was killed by Nicol Bolas, and he goes on a rampage here, and he actually takes both halves of this weapon and combines them and takes down Nicol Bolas in the story. One of the many times Nicol Bolas has died, he's part of one of his downfalls. He's just a sweet character. We got another neutering effect. It's a bestow creature, so you can play on your stuff, but what's unique about it is bestow, when the enchanted creature dies, it comes back under your control on the creature side, and you can cast it and target other people's stuff and neuter someone else, like Kenra's transformation. Pretty sweet uncommon. This new Eldrazi is pretty sick. You get a cast trigger where you steal one thing from everybody. You untap those creatures, and then they gain trample, haste, and annihilator 1. You could really screw someone up pretty badly with this. And this itself has haste and annihilator as well. So if you target one person, you can make a single individual sack 4 things. That's pretty brutal. Or you can, mix and match however you please, but it's a pretty dope card that's exclusively found in the commander decks. Shadow the Second Sun, you want to enchant yourself because it gives you a bonus beginning phase. It's like Sphinx of the Second Sun does the same thing, much cheaper because Sphinx was 8 mana and this is 6. If you already play Sphinx, you'll definitely want a copy of this. The reason why people want this kind of stuff is if they have a lot of stuff that has upkeep triggers, because it gives you a bonus upkeep, gives you a bonus draw step, and it also untaps all your stuff. So even Tim decks want this as well. Lets you play aggressive strategies. You could attack and then untap everything for blocking on other people's turns. It does a lot more work than one would expect. Oh, they're bringing back MDFCs for lands. On ETB, you get to sack another creature, gain X life and draw X cards, where X is that creature's power. This is awesome. I play as many MDFCs in my decks as I can because the value of the flexibility is just too good. The lands come in tap traditionally.
Or so he thought.
Yeah. Whoa! Enters untapped if you pay 3 life. And this is an uncommon. Holy cow. 3 life is a drop in the bucket. Yeah, I love this card. I wonder if they have multiples of these. And it's gonna be dirt cheap because it's an uncommon, so everyone can afford it. There's almost no reason why you shouldn't play one of these in any deck that's green. Apex Devastator's in a reprint. This was probably much needed. This was like a $20 card. If you're looking for it to get cheap, this will be the time to buy it a month after the set releases. It comes out June 14th. You want to wait till July 14th, which is actually a day after my birthday. Pretty exciting. Maybe that'll be my birthday gift, is buying myself a bunch of Magic cards. Ayodi Moag Ancient. This is new. On ETB, you make a Dryad Arbor. Wow. And you make more based on the number of times you've cast Moag from your command zone. That's pretty sick. Those Dryads will help you pay for your commander attacks in the future, so you have a really resilient commander here. It's almost worse to have your opponents kill this. This bottom ability is the worst part. At the beginning of each combat, land creatures control get +X/+X, where X is Jody's power. That's pretty sick. You're obviously making land creatures from the ETB clause. I like this commander a lot. Archon's a good reprint. This is like a $15 card. People like it because it's both an ETB and an attack trigger. Quorum the Undertaker gets +X/+O, where X is the greatest power among creature cards in all graveyards, and it attacks each player mills a card. And then its bottom ability is unique. It's card selection and card advantage. During each of your turns, you may play land and cast a spell from cards that were put there into libraries this turn. Because it says and, if you mill a land and multiple spells, wow, it doesn't even have to be a permanent. This guy's way better than he looks. Because you could choose anything, you have a really cool commander on your hands. You could steal someone's land, use it to cast whatever that you milled from people's libraries. Arna Kennerud Sky Captain. 4/4 with lifelink and flying, ward to force your opponent to discard a card. Whenever a modified creature you control attacks, you double the number of each kind of counter on it. For each non-token permanent attached to it, create a token that's a copy of that permanent attached to that creature. That's pretty sick. It's definitely a Voltron commander. If you weren't already winning, you'll be definitely winning more. I guess the nicer parts is if you're copying equipment that's more permanent, you can move them around, versus auras you can't. Grim Savant is pretty sick. It's basically Grim Tutor, but on a body. Get the tutor for something with lesser or equal mana value to your devotion in black. Almo Queen of Vesuva. On ETB your attacks, put an everything counter on up to one target land and one target creature. Each land with an everything on it is a land of every land type. Each non-land creature is every creature type. There's probably some way you could actually break this. I don't know what it is, but the lands seem really janky because there are unique lands out there. Like deserts is a unique land type, basic is a unique land type, snow is a unique land type. The list goes on, and some cards out there in Magic, this will find a niche in almost anything. If you wanted to build a very obscure kind of tribal deck, Almo does that for you. Pretty sick commander, in my opinion. I'm not sure about all the applications you could do with it, but I imagine it's going to be a brewer's paradise. And just based on that, I could see the expense in this. Like, I think everyone will want them for like a wacky idea. So they may come up down the road, and it's just something you want to have in your collection for when that happens. Satya Aetherflux Genius. When it attacks, create a tapped attacking token that's a copy of up to one target non-token creature control. You get 2 energy. To any of your next end steps, sack that token unless you pay 1 energy equal to its mana value. The only thing that has to attack is Satya. It has Menace and Haste, so you get to affect you the turn you play it, and it's difficult to block. If you want to make a token copy of something, that something doesn't have to be attacking as well, so you could just leave it back to block if it's significant enough that you want to save. And then it doesn't force you to use energy. I think just getting a one-off effect is good enough. So like if that creature has a death trigger on it or an ETB trigger, you'll be just as happy. Or if it's a big boy, you don't really care. And you can use that energy for something else. I imagine you'll be playing an energy deck with this. Just stockpile it for something more worthy than saving a token copy of something. It's an artifact that doubles your energy production should you make it. And then tapping it, you get energy. You may pay 1 or more. If you do, create an XX Black Aetherborn token, where X is the amount of energy paid into it. The tap ability, I think, is pretty negligible. I think it's the upper paragraph that is significant. It sucks that this is 6 mana.
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave with a bunch of scraps.
I think that will be the reason why it doesn't get too much play, but unique in that it's the first to double energy production. Okay, this is the white modal card. Let's see if this... you can pay 3 life to have it on tap. Its ETB is you get to blow up an artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. Awesome. I'm pretty excited about these. I hope all the colors are as useful as the white and the green one. Can't wait to see them. Mob. You can sack it to deal 3 damage divided as you choose among up to 3 targets. That's pretty sick. You could mix and match. You could deal 3 damage to one thing, you could do 2 and 1 to 2 different targets, or you deal 1 damage to 3 things. Hopefully you're taking out multiple things with this, which is the whole purpose of this. It's like a more fair version of Fury, because you could do the same thing, just now this has a CMC cost to it. Wormcoil Larva has a lot of similarities to Wormcoil Engine, which I imagine why they call it Larva, because it's a 3/3 and not a 6/6, and you make smaller tokens. The 2 tokens are different also. One's lifelink, one's death touch. Pretty cool creature. Hey, this one doesn't double the energy production like that red enchantment. It gives you an additional energy. Keep that in mind. This does not double, but it still increases your production, and for 2 mana, it's worth you playing in your decks if you're an energy deck. And it has a draw trigger or activated ability if you've lost more than 4 energy a turn. I like this card a lot. Slask the Swelling Scourge. Whenever it or another colorless creature you control dies, you get an experience counter. Scions and spawns you control gain Indestructible and Annihilator 1.
Total, complete, absolute annihilation.
Wow. I could see why they made it Wooburg, because a lot of the devoid creatures that make Scions are across all the colors. So they had to make this a Wooburg commander of some kind. And this thing is so scary. I think this is the face of the commander deck. It's just so good. I wonder what this is going to go for price-wise. They don't have the commander decks up here yet. Because of how apeshit crazy people are about Eldrazi, I imagine this deck will be the most expensive, and I am only saying that because the previous Eldrazi deck was also really expensive, which is a shame because you're not going to be getting too much value. I mean, there might be a reprint value in the deck itself, but there's only going to be 15 unique cards in each of these commander decks. So I don't recommend people buying them if you have vast collections like me. I never buy these. I just get them in collector packs because they slot them in like an extended version into those packs to decrease the price value. But I think the demand on this will be insane. All these rinky-dink commons and uncommons that put spawns into play are about to be a lot more valuable. Detective's Phoenix has Bestow. You have to collect evidence 6. That's pretty steep. Flying Haste gives enchanted creatures +2/+2 flying and haste, and then you can cast it for its bestow cost from your graveyard. That's the Phoenix-esque part about this. Most decks utilize their graveyard. I don't think they'll be willing to give that up for a somewhat medium effect. Kaith, Famed Mechanist. Fabricate 1, and then gives other non-token creatures Fabricate 1. That's awesome. They had to specify non-token because if that was the case, people would just choose token every time, and then it'd be an infinite loop. Very wise on Wizards' part, making sure it said non-token. It has a 2-mana activated ability. You could either populate or proliferate. Unique build construction. It'll make you want to lean into one or the other. You either want to be proliferating a bunch or you want to be populating a bunch. Although the populate in terms of comparison to proliferate is a lot weaker. Populate only gives you 1 token, while proliferate lets you target multiple things with counters on them and put an additional on there. Volatile Stormdrake. Hexproof from activated and triggered abilities. Oh, it's a Gilded Drake. You could use this as a removal spell to either steal something or force the sacrifice. Like if you don't have enough energy to pay for like a big creature, no big deal. Sack it and you just stockpile 4 energy. What makes this card really fair is it has hexproof from activated and triggered abilities, meaning you can't flicker this with permanence like you would Rune or like the dog that I was talking about earlier. You'd have to use spells to do the job. Most of these like cheap instant speed flicker effects specifically say you control. You need something that specifically says any target creature. There's probably something out there, but off the top of my head, I can't think of any. But that's how you can get some extra value out of this. It's just a fair Gilded Drake. I can see everyone wanting a copy of this just for its low floor. It's just that good. Brain Surge. Draw 4, put 2 cards from your hand back on top of your library. It's a slightly stronger version than Brainstorm because Brainstorm only lets you see 3, and you put 2 back. This lets you see 4, but keep 2. A little bit stronger and warrants the extra price tag. It's an instant, so you can do it on other people's turns. If you do top deck shenanigans, this is awesome. I don't know if Miracles was doing well in Modern nowadays, but it might make a comeback with this. Let's look at Modern decks. I wish there was a search bar. I could just type in Miracles just to see if they exist. Wow, it's pretty wild because back when I was playing Modern, the top performers were Tron, Dredge, and Miracles. And I don't know if the blue-white decks play Miracles. It's possible, but I don't see any of those lists titles in here for the highest performing decks, which is pretty crazy how much the Modern format has changed since I last played. Back when I was in the military, I think it was pre-2017. It's been 7 years. I guess that's enough time for a dramatic change. Power creep's a real thing. But I think with Modern Horizons giving as much support as they are for Tron and for Miracles, they might make a big comeback. Ulik Fuse Atrocity. Whenever you cast an Eldrazi spell, you may pay 2 additional wastes. If you do, copy all spells you control, then copy all other activated and triggered abilities you control. You may choose new targets for the copies. Holy cow. But you could save a lot of costs if you somehow give your stuff flash speed. Like if you have Vidalcan Orrery in play and you're able to cast multiple Eldrazi on the stack, you would only have to pay the 2 wastes once. I don't know if Vidalcan Orrery will go up in price, but it might because of this card. Get a copy for $5. We'll see if anything changes in the market. I wouldn't be surprised. Disa the Restless. Whenever one or more creatures controlled deal damage to a player, create a Tarmogoyf token. This is in the Commander deck, so you can't play it in Modern, but an interesting vanilla deck for sure. What is fair about this card is you can't replace your tokens that die, but you do replace the traditional permanents. So once it's in your graveyard, the Tarmogoyf token would just fizzle, it evaporates. There's no target for this to bring back. Also unique about this is if you discard your Goyfs, if you mill your Goyfs, you cheat them into play. Thief of Existence. When you cast this, exile up to 1 target non-creature, non-land permanent opponent controls may have 4 or less. If you do, it gains when this leaves the battlefield, target opponent draws a card. It's basically a green version of Thought-Knots here, and it's a mana cheaper. When Tron was doing its thing in my heyday in Modern, it was green Tron, so like this fits in that deck quite nicely. This is really good. Affinity for artifacts. Every time they print one of these, someone finds a way of breaking it. Affinity, they just play and dump all their artifacts into play and make this 0. It's not that hard to do. And it's a significant body. I think this is more significant in 60 card formats. In Commander, I could break this, and I have historically when I play Affinity. Pretty sweet card. Affinity, when I was looking at the top decks in Modern, was not in that list either. This might be enough to give that some life again.
It's alive!
Bloodbraid Challenger. When I played Modern, I specifically played Ponza. I loved messing with people's mana bases. It's one of my favorite ways of playing Magic is not letting my opponents play the game. It's terrible, I know. I love Blood Moon and I love Stone Rain and Pillage. I used to run Bloodbraid just so you could wheel into those cards. This is 5 mana, so it just increases the threshold of the things you could get. It also has Escape, so you can do it again later should this die. It's a really sweet Cascade card.
It's the gift that keeps on giving the whole year.
Thraben Charm's pretty good. You can either take out a creature, destroy an enchantment, or exile any number of target players' graveyards. Those are significant modal abilities, and it's a cheap instant, which I like. When I play instants, I want them to be 2 mana or cheaper, and I want to interact with the board somehow, and this checks all my boxes. Dog Umbra, another cool common. It's flexible in that you can target your stuff and opponents' things. If you target your opponent's things, you take away their ability to attack or block, but if you put it on your stuff, should your creature die, the enchantment falls off instead. Echoes of Eternity. If a triggered ability of a colorless spell you control or another colorless permanent you control triggers, the ability triggers an additional time. Holy cow. Whenever you cast a colorless spell, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. Well, I think this will fit in very niche color combination that it's going to be colorless because that triple waste is significant. This card's pretty busted. I don't expect this to be too expensive because it's a rare, but because of how popular colorless decks are, maybe. It's not going to see 60 card formats, that's for sure, because doing nothing for 6 mana costs you the game. This is strictly a commander card for sure. Basking Broodskell is not bad either. Has adapt for 2, but whenever +1/+1 counter gets thrown on it, you make it an Eldrazi Scion. If you have alternative means of throwing counters on things, you could make a ton of sacrificial fodder for a bunch of mana. This is also a really good uncommon. Whenever you cast a creature with mana value 4, 5, or 6, you create 2 Scions, and then whenever you cast a creature spell with mana 7 or greater, you draw 3 cards. Because you make Scions, it's like you're building up to that sweet draw trigger. I have a buddy that plays Emoti. This would be a great card for Emoti decks because you just cascade into these things. Get a bunch of free creatures, get a bunch of free draw by just cascading a bunch. Ew. Probably the worst mythic, Bolivian Sour. This got reprinted in Thunder Junction. It's like a 20-cent card sucking up a mythic slot. Pretty brutal. Oh, this looks like a very unassuming uncommon, but an issue you have with playing Eldrazi decks is you have a slow buildup in the early game and people will just be beating on you mercilessly because they know what your game plan is. This life gain trigger lets you rubber band yourself back in the game to a comfortable position. And it also has Annihilator too, because why not? If you have a Eldrazi deck, don't sleep on this because it's worth you slotting in. Wow. Pulling out all the stops for the commons and uncommons. This one has Adapt 2, but whenever one or more counters are put on it, you get to return a permanent from your graveyard to your hand. Putting counters on things is extremely easy. It doesn't care how the counters get on it. Devourer of Destiny. You may reveal this card from your hand in the opener. You may have your upkeep, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may put one of those cards back on top of your library, exile the rest. When you cast the spell, exile target permanent with one or more colors. It's alright. I don't play Spine of Isha that often. This is a little worse than Spine because Spine could at least hit lands. This specifically can only hit something with a color, kind of like Ugin stipulations, but the opening hand business is kind of whatever as well. The 7 CMC is significant for 60 card formats because if you have all the Tron lands, if you have Urza's Mine, Tower, and Factory, it equates to 7 mana. It's every non-basic land type. Just like that Vesuvan Simic creature, this land has all those unique land types. All these decks that care about these unique lands will want a copy of this. Pretty sick. March from Velis Vel. Choose a non-basic land type. Each land you control of that type becomes a copy of target creature you control. Gains haste on turn. Because you can only run one non-basic in your commander deck, it feels kind of weird that this is in your commander deck. It's really hard to pull something unique off with this because it wants you to make multiple copies of something with your lands, but getting there seems extremely hard. At least as flashback and you can do it again, but I think this has a really hard stipulation. What's sad about it is it's not legal in Modern because it's in the commander decks. And this would be much better in a Modern space because they could play 4 ofs in their 60 card format. Final act, it's basically Farewell, except it destroys things, and it variance counters. It does exile graveyards, so like Farewell. Pretty sick modal spell. It'll be expensive, because everybody will want a copy of it. It's like a staple in black. Siege Chain Lieutenant. This is very similar to the 2 mana Lieutenant card, where it gives you a Thopter with haste. This gives you 2 goblins every combat, and then he could sack a goblin to deal damage to something, kind of like Siege Gang Commander. Very dense card for its CMC. I think anyone who cares about goblins or cares about plopping bodies for like a deck like Purphoros, you'll want a copy of this. Winter Moon. It's Winter Orb for just non-basic lands. I love this card a lot. I want a copy of it. This might be on the salt meter. Might be pretty high. It's not as high as Winter Orb, but it's pretty darn close. It just punishes multicolored decks. Sylvan Safekeeper. This is a needed reprint. You can sack land and give something Shroud. This is like a $15 card last time I checked. Nethergorth's new. Power is equal to the number of cards in your graveyard. For 1 mana less, you get less range because it only cares about your graveyard, but it also has escape. It's a little
counterproductive, sir.
Because you want cards in your graveyard to influence its stats, and this thing forces you to exile 4 card types from your graveyard. It's almost not worth playing, in my opinion. Interesting give and take kind of card. Null Elemental Blast. For a waste, you could counter a multicolored spell or destroy a multicolored permanent. This is great. This probably will just be destroying commanders. I like it. I think the colorless decks need more interaction. This is probably an auto-include. Well, this Kudo looks a lot better. Quite the chonker. Still hate what he does and brings to the game. Null Drifter is basically Mold Drifter with Annihilator. Whenever you cast a spell, you draw 2 cards, but you could evoke it and draw 2 for its evoke cost, which I imagine what 90% of people were going to do. Meltdown's going to reprint. You didn't know this was like a $10 card and was way overdue. I think I paid $20. This is one of the best artifact hosers in existence. If you don't own a copy, highly recommend you get one. Kappa Cannoneer, this is another welcome reprint for Modern. It's just a difficult body to remove, and it's evasive, and it scales up. It's a scary threat in 60 card formats, and I imagine the people who want to play those decks will be happy about this reprint. Spawn Gang Commander, it's basically Siege Gang, got taken over by an Eldrazi. Does pretty much the same thing as Siege Gang Commander. White of the Reliquary gets +1/+1 for each creature in your graveyard. You could sack a creature to search your library for a land, any land. The previous Knight iteration we had, you had to sack a forest or plains to get the effect. It also costs 1 more. This is just strictly better. And going down in a mana resource, you're going down in a creature resource, which are, I guess, a little more expendable in my opinion. You're not hurting yourself in the long run, and you actually ramp. You net mana from activating its ability. And the fact that you get any land is really significant. I would just get the land that cares about creatures in your graveyard, and you tap for bonus mana equal to that count. We had a nice first target with this. It also has Vigilance, so you could attack and activate this ability post-combat. Urza's Cave comes in untapped, and you could sack it to search your library for a land. Great for Tron because you get your Urza lands with this. It's good for just Commander too. Like it a lot. We don't have enough tools in Magic that lets you tutor for any land, so the more we get, the better. And this has a lot of utility in that you could tap it for mana. Wow. And there's now going to be Snow-Covered Waste. This is the first. I imagine people will want 40s of these in Commander. I don't know what the significance of making them snow will be. We'll have to see as the spoilers go on. Maybe there'll be stuff that cares about snow permanence, but the most common thing that people do with snow permanence or snow lands is they exile it with the imprint on Extraplanar Lens. I think this will be a very expensive acquisition if you want to get like 40 of these for your Commander collection, and probably expensive just for everybody in general because of how many copies everybody's going to want. Solitude, this looks a lot better than its previous iteration. I like it a lot. Priest of Titania is a good reprint. I think this was like a $10 elf. It's good because you float a ton of green mana off of it. Adds a green for each elf on the battlefield. It also takes into account your opponent's creatures, and elves are the best mana dorks in the business, and in green I'd be shocked to see people not running elves. This is a really good lord. It kind of does things on both ends of a spectrum. It cares about pumping the stats of colorless creatures, so like your tokens, and then on the opposite end of the CMC spectrum, cast something 7 or greater, it costs less. Very unique lord. I like this a lot. It will fit in different types of archetypes. And that brings us to the end.
I wish it would never end.
The first day is always the longest because there are a ton of leaks. That all just piles up right before the official start date of spoiler season. But I assure you, beyond this, there will be much shorter videos. And if you stuck around this long, clearly you liked hearing what I had to say about the applications of these cards. And I'll be covering this for the next 2 weeks. I'll be putting out a video every day except for the weekends because they don't release spoilers on the weekends. Subscribe so you don't miss out. Everyone take care now. Bye.